All righty. So our lesson today is the title is Jesus before Pilate the second time. Incorporates quite a few things into this study. I don't know about how you guys study the Gospels. I like to do a parallel approach. I've got a harmony of the Gospels I've had for years, ever since Lipscomb, actually. But, I don't know, when was that? That was way back yonder.
Yeah.
It's an old one. So I enjoy looking at that, how it plays in. So the way I want to do this class is to read portions of the scriptures in various references, and then we'll stop and talk about that part and take another little section. So just kind of follow with me, and what I want you to be listening for is maybe differences or things that you don't hear in the other section and that type of thing. So we're going to begin. I need a reader for a short passage, about 5 verses. Anybody good for reading 5 verses for me? Luke 23:13, beginning, and going through 16, Greg, if you don't mind.
Matthew.
Yeah, Luke, sorry. That would be a good point. Yeah. Which one? Luke 23:13, and then through 16.
Pilate then called together the chief priests, the leaders, and the people, and said to them, "You brought me this man as one who is perverting the people, and here I have examined him in your presence, and have not found this man guilty of any of your charges against him. Neither has Herod, for he sent him back to us. Indeed, he has done nothing to deserve death. I will therefore have him flogged and release him."
Okay, so this section, it kind of stands alone. There's not a parallel to it. It's when Jesus first comes back to Pilate. So what strikes you about that little section there, those few verses? Quite a bit in it if you look at it. What strikes you about it?
No, he says he's done nothing wrong.
He's innocent.
He's still flawed.
He's innocent. Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. He still flogged it. Okay, what else?
Herod found nothing wrong with him,
Herod found nothing wrong with it.
other than he thought he was cruel.
Yeah, it kind of, if you remember his time before Herod, Roger did a good job with that, but he kind of basically made fun of him. It's kind of like the time before Herod was like entertainment today kind of thing. Like, oh, I got to see him. It wasn't really not much about it, about professional trial or anything of that nature. So Pilate declares the innocence of Jesus, infers that Herod declared the innocence of Jesus. So, like we talked about a few weeks ago, this is smelling to high heaven, right? I mean, he flogged him, even though he was innocent. Everybody says he's innocent, but he's still getting punished. What's that like? To know you didn't do something and people keep accusing you. What's that like?
You have a situation where there was a few people, 2 or 3 people, especially in the family, one of them done something wrong, and all of you got away for it.
Yeah. Actually, I do remember some of that. Yeah. I don't know who it was, but yeah. Yeah, it's not very fun, is it? But that's the kind of place that sets the tone for what we're looking at about the trial. So I need a reader for 2 sections, and we're going to read them back to back. I want you to look for differences or clarification that you see in each of the passages. I need somebody for Matthew 27:15 through 19. Okay, you got it? Matthew 27:15 through 19. And then Mark 15:6 through 10. Mark 15, 6 through 10. Somebody got that? Wouldn't mind doing that? Got it? Okay. So we'll start with Matthew 27, 15 through 19, and then we'll go to Mark 15, 6 through 10. Okay.
Now it was the governor's custom at the feast to release a prisoner chosen by the crowd. At that time, they had a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. So when the crowd had gathered, Pilate asked them, "Which one do you want me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called Christ?" For he knew it was out of envy that they had handed Jesus over to him. While Pilate was sitting on the judge's seat, his wife sent him this message: "Don't have anything to do with that innocent man, for I have suffered a great deal today in a dream because of him."
And then Mark 15.
6 through 10.
Yeah, 6 to 10, yes.
Now it was the custom of the feast to release a prisoner whom the people requested. A man called Barabbas was in prison with the insurrectionists who had committed murder in the uprising. The crowd came up and asked Pilate to do for them what he usually did. "Do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews?" asked Pilate, knowing it was out of envy that the chief priests had handed Jesus over to him. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have Pilate release Barabbas instead.
It's okay, no problem. So what do you notice? A little bit different maybe, or a little bit more clarification. What do you notice in these? I'll tell you what I noticed in a minute. I was kind of curious, what do you notice when you read those passages? I think it's important for us to consider these kind of things and why. But you notice any differences? We notice, Roger.
I noticed that even Pilate's wife considered him innocent and warned Pilate.
So one of them talks about Pilate's wife, the other one doesn't. Okay, very good. What else did you notice?
Well, the Mark passage, it attributes a reason or a, I can't think of the right word, but motivation.
Yes. Motivation of the people for railroading him. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
even for the chief priest
Mm-hmm.
to be handed over, but it was envy.
That's interesting, isn't it? It's very interesting. What do you, when you think about them and envy, what were they envious of? We're going to get to that in a moment, but I want you to think about that a minute. What were they envious of?
His power and his power.
Very power. You know, we're going to talk about power in a minute. And I ran across some thoughts that speak to that, and I think it's relevant for us today. But his power, you know, these people were misusing their power, and they envied the power that he had. What power did he have? He had power to do miracles, but I'm talking about what other power did he have that they envied so desperately?
The ability to get people to follow him.
People, you know, people following him everywhere. They're hanging on to every word. You know, they want to know. We can't have that because we're the leaders. Yeah. Okay. You get that kind of picture with them, and so it's really a desperation for these people. So from Matthew's account, we discover Barabbas. I'm saying that wrong. I'll tell you why in a minute. But Barabbas was a notorious criminal. From Mark, he adds that he was a murderer. Okay. In other words, what's notorious mean?
Known for it.
Known for it. He was all over the news. You know, today he'd be on all the news networks, and he'd be all over. Everybody knew this guy was an insurrectionist. He was a murderer. He was a terrible man. He was, you know, that was his reputation. In Matthew, we're told that Pilate's wife warned him not to have anything to do with the trial. What do you remember? What did she? What made her warn him? What kind of a nightmare, a dream? It's like, man, don't have anything to do with this guy. You know, maybe a warning from the Lord, or maybe just her intuition. I don't know. Women are good at intuition. You ever notice that?
Yeah.
Oh, was I not supposed to say that? Sorry, guys. Yeah. Both Mark and Matthew indicate that Pilate knew Jesus was being railroaded. because of the religious envy of the religious leaders, like you pointed out. You know, envy is wicked.
That shows that envy shows how corrupted their mindset was.
Yeah.
That knowing that he was blameless, and they were willing to have Barabbas, no murder. You know, it just flipped. Everything flipped. In that mindset there. The envy took, that envy is so strong. And the worst thing, you talk about the thing they hated the worst was he said he was God, and he was God's son.
I'm writing this down, Chris, because I'm coming back to that because it's relevant to something I'm going to talk about in a minute. So hang on to that.
But Pilate and Herod was in charge, and they let the people, they gave them what they wanted.
Pilate, what a wimpy leader, right? I mean, just okay, guys, and we'll talk about maybe why that was in a minute. There's reasons I think for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll let you speak to that in a minute, Greg. But there's some really important reasons for Pilate's perspective for that. But yeah, that's not how you lead, right? John's little section of this is short, and I'll just read that real quick. It says in John 18:39, but it's your custom for me, but it is your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at the time of the Passover. Do you want me to release the king of the Jews? They shouted back, not him, give us Barabbas. Now Barabbas will take part in the rebellion. That's the short little section about Barabbas and the interaction with the Jewish people. And if you notice a little difference, the people don't come to Pilate. Pilate brings it up to the people. So I don't know if that was another time or yes, ma'am.
Was Barabbas a Jew?
I don't know about that. Think so?
I think so.
Probably was.
I think he was a zealot.
Probably was. Yeah, I would probably agree with that. I hadn't really looked into that, but thinking about his actions, we'll get to that in a minute. Yeah. Yeah. We'll talk about that when we talk about. We're gonna look at Barabbas pretty close here in a minute. But hang on to that. Thank you for bringing that up. So we got three parallel passages for the continuation of our study. So I need three readers. And same kind of thing, just listen for the differences, listen for things that stand out to you. Matthew 27:20 through 23.
I got that.
Roger got that one. Mark 15:11 through 15. Gotcha. Luke 23:18 through 25. Okay, so Roger 27:20 through 23, Mark 15:11 through 15, Luke 23:18 through 25. Got those? Angela got that? Okay. All right, so go ahead and start, Rod.
But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus executed. Which of the two do you want me to release to you? Asked the governor. Barabbas, they answered. What shall I do then with Jesus, who you call Christ? Pilate asked. They answered, crucify him. Why? What crime has he committed? Asked Pilate. But they shouted louder, crucify him.
Okay, and then Mark 15:11 through 15.
But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have Pilate release Barabbas and said, what shall I do then? The one you call the king of the Jews, Pilate asked them. Crucify him, they shouted. Why? What crime has he committed? Asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, crucify him. Wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. He had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified.
Okay, and Luke 18 through 25.
With one voice they cried out, away with this man, release Barabbas to us. Barabbas has been thrown into prison for an insurrection in the city and for a murder. Wanting to release Jesus, Pilate appealed to them again, but they kept shouting, crucify him, crucify him. For the third time he spoke to them, why? What crime has this man committed? I have found in him no grounds for the death penalty. Therefore I will have him punished and then release him. But with loud shouts, they insistently demanded that he be crucified, and their shouts prevailed. So Pilate decided to grant their demands. He released the man who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, the one they asked for, and surrendered Jesus to their will.
Okay. So this gives us a little clarity, doesn't it, on what's going through Pilate's mind. What do you see, Greg?
Well, you've got to have some idea of the political situation that Pilate was in.
Politics doesn't create problems for people, does it?
Pilate came to power because there was a guy in Rome
Right.
that was his protector, really. Well, this guy fell out of favor about this time. I think his name is Sejanus, something like that.
So he's lost his connection.
Yeah. And he will be recalled to Rome after this. The emperor dies on his way, and so he escapes, basically. But Pilate made a mess of things with the Jews to begin with. He wanted to bring the Roman standards into Jerusalem. He did some things with the Samaritans. He did some things with the Jews that were really cruel.
Yeah.
And
so he's trying to pacify the Jews because they can cause him real problems.
Yeah.
Everybody get that picture? So that's the kind of it's a political power, and it's all this political structure, the systemic things going on in the culture that's pushing a lot of these things in Pilate's mind, the way it looks like. Matthew and Mark and John mentioned that Pilate traditionally offered a release of a prisoner. And it seems to me, this is just my conjecture, okay? So don't take this as gospel. But it seems to me that he chooses Barabbas because why in the world would they release Barabbas? Why in the world would anybody choose this notorious murdering criminal over, okay, think Timothy McVeigh, okay? Think that way, okay? Why would anybody choose a destructive insurrectionist that killed a bunch of people, or one or two, I don't know how many, but why would they choose this man over this man that I see so innocent? That seems to be the setup that Pilate's been looking for outs ever since. Why did he send it to to Herod?
So he doesn't have to.
You know, I had to mess with it. Yeah, hand it over. You take care of this. I don't want to take care of it. And so here he is again. He said, "Oh, I got an idea." Okay, it just my mind as well. I'll put this guy up there. No way they're going to choose him. Okay, but you know how it goes. Matthew tells us the religious leaders had stirred up the people against Jesus. Has everybody here saw the sound of the crucifixion at Youth in Action? You know, when you heard that whispering like, hey, no, let's choose Barabbas. Let's choose, all that kind of they're running around trying to use their influence, using their power. Back to Betty's work, they're trying to use their power to get what they want. They're does that happen? Yeah. Okay. But the crowd became so ruly that Pilate gave in, and I think the reasons that Greg talked about, he doesn't want any problems because of where he is politically and where he is in this, zeitgeist he finds himself in, and he's like, oh, I got to deal with this. I got to get it off my plate somehow. So that brings us to actually, I'm going to save John to last. He talks about some of the things we already talked about. But we'll come back to John. But it's kind of out of sync with the other ones, so I'm putting over here by itself for right now. Matthew 27:24, just a short reading, 24 through 26. Somebody grab that for me. Matthew 27:24 through 26. Okay.
Pilate saw that he wasn't getting anywhere, and that a riot was developing. So he sent for a bowl of water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, I am innocent of this man's blood. The responsibility is yours. And all the people yelled back, we will take responsibility for his death, we and our children. So Pilate released Barabbas to them. He ordered Jesus flogged and a lead-tipped whip, then turned him over to the Roman soldiers to be crucified.
Question for you. Was Jesus flogged twice? What do you think, Greg?
I'm beginning to think that it was one as a show.
At the first, when Pilate, he says, I'll have him punished. I don't know, we don't know if he did or didn't, but I think he may have, right?
Yeah. And then the second one was probably more brutal.
Yeah. It seems like the first one was a beating, and the second one was the actual scourging. The scourging went with the crucifixion. It was part of it, kind of like the I don't know what you call it, prelude, which, like Roger said last week, a lot of people didn't survive the. I read a description. I decided not to share it with you. I mean, you can look it up if you'd like, but it's like gruesome. That it's horrifying to think of that, and to think of being beaten twice. And actually, he was beaten by Herod's group too, I would imagine, or mistreated. You know, sometimes I hear people, say, "Oh, God just didn't know what it's like to be mistreated." Well, I think probably He does, but that's for another day. So Matthew has Pilate washing his hands and saying he's innocent of the blood of Jesus. We're going to look at this in more detail in a minute, the hand washing. The people answered that his blood should be on them and their children. What does that mean? Just the Jewish people? Who all was present there? I don't think it's just Jewish people.
No, it wasn't, but I think it comes down that the Jews were saying, we will take responsibility.
They're taking responsibility, okay, because of legal, because of the, I can't think of that.
And that has not been used wisely.
Oh, yeah, and yeah. Hang on to that, Greg, when I talk about, you'll know when to bring it up in a minute. But basically, his blood be on us and our children. So we're children of Israel when we become Christians. So his blood's on all of us. I think that's
In the sense that we're all sinners.
absolutely.
We are the reason for his death.
Lord Jesus, have mercy on me, a sinner. Absolutely. That's an early church prayer that was said repeatedly. That we
his own procedure now.
Yeah.
That's a good example.
Yeah. And so, I think that's good for us to keep in mind. We'll get to that when we talk about Barabbas in a minute. So John 9, the last reading, and then we'll get to some of the things I wanted to kind of flesh out. The John 19:4 through 15 passage, a rather long passage. Does anybody doesn't mind reading a long one? Laura, you mind reading that one? John 19:4 through 15. John kind of stands alone. He kind of says it a little differently, but I think it's important to look at John.
Starting with verse 4.
4 through 15, yes.
Once more Pilate came out and said to the Jews, look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him. When Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe.
And hang on just a second. I don't mean to stop you, but that goes with Greg's thought about the two beatings, because when did they put the purple robe on him? When did he get the purple robe?
Was it after?
After a beating. Okay, so yeah, go ahead.
When Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." As soon as the chief priests and the officials saw him, they shouted, "Crucify, crucify." But Pilate answered, "You take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for a charge against him." The Jews insisted, "We have a law, and according to that law he must die, because he claimed to be the Son of God." When Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid, and he went back inside the palace. "Where do you come from?" he asked Jesus. But Jesus gave him no answer. "Do you refuse to speak to me?" Pilate said. "Don't you realize I have power either to free you or to crucify you?" Jesus answered, "You would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." From then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free, but the Jews kept shouting, "If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar." When Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judge's seat at the place known as the Stone Pavement, which in Aramaic is Gabbatha. It was the day of preparation of Passover week, about the 6th hour. "Here is your king," Pilate said to the Jews. But they shouted, take him away, crucify him." "Shall I crucify your king?" Pilate asked. "We have no king but Caesar." The chief priests answered.
Wow. There's a lot in that passage. A whole lot of insight into Pilate, a whole lot of insight into the people. I know what I see. What do you guys see before I start?
Pilate's a coward.
It's a coward. Yeah, back to yeah. What in the world?
And it's like, to me, every time I go through this, I think the squeaky wheel got the grease, sort of thing.
Yeah.
It was, he just caved in.
Yeah.
And he used that fact. He knew he had fallen out of favor with the emperor. And that was driving part of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
He knew he was in trouble.
What do you think got him when they said, "You're no friend of Caesar if you let him go"? Did he want to be a friend of Caesar? Absolutely. If he was a friend of Caesar, he was in good, right? So, yeah.
Well, I think that also ties in with, going back to the question earlier in verse 11 here, is that there's kind of two levels of what, because when you were talking about whose blood this is on, because there is the very earthly circumstances that God was working within.
Right.
That was the political situation there, but there's also the spiritual level, the sort of spiritual battle, if you will, where, I mean, Jesus, he gave his life.
Yeah.
It wasn't
taken,
from him.
right, absolutely.
And, he could have called some down names and all that. I mean, so he was letting all of this happen. And so there's that aspect of it.
Let's look at that, in reference to that, let's look at verse 11. Jesus says, "You have no power over me if we're not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed over me to you is guilty of greater sin." What's that? He could have called 10,000 angels. Jesus had the power. Pilate didn't have any power. You're right. He had no power. But Christ was allowing that. And so they had the spiritual level is this decision of Christ to follow through and keep his because he could have not, right? I mean, he could have, but he did. He kept his position. Yeah.
He's saying that Jesus had a choice.
Okay.
He really have a choice.
Absolutely.
Well, he came here to do God's will, and it was God's plan that he would sacrifice. So I'm not sure he's successful.
What do you think?
I'm good. Jesus is love. If you say Jesus and you can't follow him, you love you can follow him. And because of his purpose, it's such in the beginning. Sure, love is going to fulfill the purpose. It cannot back off. It would not say no. It would be impossible. Because then it's not love.
Absolutely. But did that mean he didn't have a choice?
He said your will, not mine.
He did.
And he already made.
He made this choice,
He had the
but he made the choice.
in the beginning.
Yeah.
Before we're
Yeah.
created.
He had no choice if he wanted to save creation. He had no choice, but the choice was made.
Physically, he had no choice. Spiritually, he chose what God wanted to do.
Yeah.
And if the power was God, which it is, he can call out a legion of angels and destroy the power of death.
Yeah. And so,
The
yeah,
miracles he did.
if we take, go ahead.
Oh, I forget what verse it is, but it says that that Christ learned obedience to his suffering. So there's an element to which the human form of Christ he learned to be obedient to the Father. I mean, it's all above my head.
Yeah, it's
but
hard. Yeah.
He was perfect in that human form, but yet he dealt with those temptations, and he had to learn that obedience to those difficult things. So to that extent, I think all of this, I think everything we're saying is correct at some level.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he had a mission, and he is God, he's gonna follow through with that, but at the same time, he could have pulled out of that.
I ain't doing this. Yeah, to me, it's like what held him to the cross was love. What held him to the cross was passion for the people of God. It wasn't I got to do this. It was, to me, it's like, I love my creation so much. I'm doing this, and it was a decision, but
Made before creation.
made before creation. Yes.
It's all assumed.
Hang on a second. Linda was saying.
I agree that the decision was made before creation, but I think he also made the decision again in the garden when he prayed on our little bit long. Because his will was to let this cup pass from him. He didn't want to go to the cross, but he did. I think he had the choice then to change it.
Yeah.
But he didn't.
Yeah. And so you guys that are married, you chose to get married, right? You choose every day to be married? Pretty much. I choose this, right? Sometimes good days, bad days, right? You're making that
Long-term.
continued commitment. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I just looking at verse 11 there, and you get the answer to everything everybody's saying right there. The opposite of the choice he made there, which he states at the top, you couldn't unless power came from above.
That's right.
The choice was made.
Choice was made already. Yeah.
Because the opposite of that was he could have called down 10,000 angels and he took them all.
That's right.
But the choice was made.
Well, whenever it's favor, therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin.
Mm-hmm.
Is he talking about the one that handed him over for earthly, or is he talking about God?
I'd say both and. Oh, you mean, I don't know. I mean, no. Yeah, I see but I think, whoever handed me over was talking about the people that handed him over. But there's a spiritual element to it as well that, or could be a spiritual thing about, the work of Satan. I don't know. You could. Yeah.
And that brings up another question. They had the greater sin, greater responsibility. So is it the reason?
Yeah, that's another class. I would say probably, but that's another class. So here's what I'll kind of get out of John. In John, Pilate comes out of the second time after scourging. The people say he claimed to be the Son of God. This troubles Pilate. And then he has a deeper conversation with Jesus, and Pilate's put in his position against Caesar, and Caesar wins. Okay. And then the people, if you notice, choose Caesar, which brings us to this closer look at Barabbas. And remember the thought about somebody had about envy earlier. And Greg, your thought about Barabbas in a minute. Barabbas, we say his name wrong, actually. It's Bar-Abbas, which means son of father. Some of the early manuscripts say Jesus Barabbas. The Bible doesn't take that. Yours does? Okay. Some people think the reason that is because people didn't want him to be associated with Jesus. So they took it out. They didn't want him to be associated. But I think it's interesting if his name means Jesus, son of Abba, father, and Jesus is known as the Son of God. There's a pretty interesting parallel between Barabbas and Jesus. The people's choice of Barabbas had more spiritual implications than we think sometimes, maybe. The choice was between Jesus, the Son of the Father, or Jesus, the Son of God. Barabbas was actually guilty of what people were saying Jesus was doing. He was guilty of political insurrection. He was guilty of murder. He was guilty of all these, and Jesus was being accused of it and had no guilt. So here's the thing in the Barabbas picture, it's choosing power or Caesar over the cross. So I want to take a minute to contrast the Barabbas narrative with Jesus. Listen to some words, and if you know where these words are from, keep to yourself for a moment. Today, Christianity stands at the head of this country. I pledge that I will never tie myself to those who want to destroy Christianity. We want to fill our culture again with the Christian spirit. We want to burn out all the recent immoral development in literature and theater and the arts and the press. In short, we want to burn out the poison of immorality, which has entered into our whole life and culture as a result of liberal excess in the past few years. Take those words at face value. What do they sound like? Is that okay? Yeah. Betterment of humanity. Morality. Yeah. Okay. Here's what one listener said upon hearing these words. This puts into words everything I've been searching for years. It's the first time someone gave form to what I want. A lot of us would say the same thing. You know whose words they were? Adolf Hitler. This came from a book I've been reading by Diane Lamberg, Redeeming Power, Understanding Authority and Abuse in the Church. It's about the recent sexual abuse scandals and all the things that happened in churches that have got covered up. But Hitler masked his true purpose and deceived the people of God into thinking he was their champion. My goodness. Yeah. So we got to be careful about how we use power. If you contrast Barabbas, he was using power the way the people wanted Jesus to use power. Jesus refused to use power that way. So what does that say about us as a church? What do we do with power? Has the church ever abused power? Back to your point, Greg.
Absolutely.
What do we do with the Jews?
Jews, they took that verse and they did the pogroms and all sorts of things that, and some of the things in, I don't know how you want to define that term, but as such things as making Jews eat pork, making them convert, then
Forcibly.
If they didn't convert, then torture,
yeah.
Steal their children, raise them as Gentiles, Christians.
And then you got the Crusades. You remember the Crusades? So power has been, by Christianity, by Christendom, power has been abused and used in the wrong way in the name of Christ. We need to be aware of that. We don't need to sugarcoat that. We need to be consciously aware. How are we using the power? Are we coercing people?
You think about power and envy, what it led to there, the Jewish hierarchy chooses Caesar, Rome, pagan, over Jewish.
They chose power over the love of Christ.
Historically, politically, that is everything they stood for.
Henry Nouwen, I think I said that right. Is it Henry or Henri? I can't. He said the temptation to consider power as an apt instrument for the proclamation of the gospel is the greatest temptation of all. The greatest temptation of all. What was Jesus tempted with in the last temptation, the third temptation? If you bow to me, I'll give you all. And he resisted that the rest of his days. Let's not take up that mantle of power. Let's cling to the love of Christ always in dealing with people.
We try to legislate immorality instead of thinking how Jesus thought about the souls of man.
Absolutely. He loved people more than.
Yeah.
Gotta be careful with that.
Wipe out all immorality, we've done his duty. It's not our duty to wipe out immorality. He's already wiped it out.
Yeah. Our duty is love.
He'll do justice when
Yeah.
the time comes.
Very good point. So Barabbas, let me say it right this time. Barabbas parallels our story. You said something all your life some way, it's hard to change. We're condemned guilty and deserving of death, Romans 3:23. And we're freed because of his death, Romans 8:1. Think about that. I am Barabbas. I've been set free. I'm guilty. He's not. I'm guilty. I've been set free. I want to end with 1 Peter 3:18. For Christ died for sins once for all, the righteous for the unrighteous, to bring you to God. He was put to death in the body, but made alive by the Spirit. I had a little thing on the hand washing of Pilate, but I'll save that. But just in short, Pilate's hand washing was kind of another way to align with the Jews. It was one of their rituals that's in the Old Testament. I think that's probably his motive for that, and it did nothing to absolve his guilt. In fact, if you know much about Pilate and history, he ends up pretty devastated at the end of things. So his wife was right. Listen to your wife, guys. All right. Thanks, guys, for your attention and your comments and all the things for today. Appreciate it. Thank you.